What's going on, everyone? Today is February 13th, 2024. You are tuned in to the Invested in Hockey podcast. Today is episode 15. My name's Anthony Santini. I'll be chatting with you today, joined here with
Eric Wilson.
We're going to be talking about the NHL, everything that has happened in the past week, and everything that we think might happen in the coming week. But something that we do know that happened just this past weekend was, first of all, a fantastic time. Second of all, a bad beat with our Super Bowl predictions. But what do we think about the Super Bowl just overall?
Honestly, I loved it. I thought it was a good kind of vibe, and there was something to do, and there was two good teams going at it, and two teams you wouldn't always predict at the start of the year. I think a lot of people knew these teams were favorites, but I think just seeing them in the finals and seeing everyone else eliminated was pretty sick. But yeah, how'd you find that?
Yeah, obviously, the Chiefs beat the 49ers 25-22 in overtime with a game-winning touchdown. And for me, one of the most surreal things that I kind of noticed with the weekend in general was just kind of the anticipation of the Super Bowl. Like, every single person I talked to, whether it be my professor, my classmates, the dude at Tim Hortons, like a buddy walking at the gym, like whatever it is, everyone was talking about the Super Bowl, and it was almost like a cool atmosphere, like being on campus, like people chatting about it. And it's just crazy to see how, like, around the world, everyone is like fixated on this one game. And honestly, a discussion for another day is how impactful gambling is on that game and how just surreal the money that's placed on this game is. Mm-hmm. But like I said, a topic for another day. We were lucky enough to actually pick the Chiefs to win. However, I was kind of rooting for the Niners. It would have been nice to see the Brock Purdy, that story. I'm a big fan of, like, Mr. Irrelevant coming back, winning the Lombardi Trophy, and then, obviously Mahomes strikes again, but nothing to our surprise. Anyways, let's try to keep it focused more on hockey, but I know you wanted to do a little segment about hockey and how it correlates with Super Bowl, so I don't know if you want to get into that.
Yeah, so I guess to get into that, we want to focus on hockey, and basically for anyone who doesn't know, Patrick Mahomes is one of the best football players. You can compare him to a lot of NHL players. Obviously, there's no quarterback position in the NHL, but on the other hand of things, we had Brock Purdy, who was the last pick in the NFL draft in 2022, or 2021, I believe it was. One of those 2 years. But to kind of make a point here, we've had many NHL matchups, call it Stanley Cup finals, where you have two teams facing off that might not be equal to each other, or their star players might not be equal to each other. So I guess to start the conversation with you, Sans, I'll bring up a few players, and you can tell me if you see anything in common with them and either what happened in the Super Bowl or just a few of the players in the Super Bowl. So one player that I'm going to name to you is Cole Caufield.
So if I were to relate Cole Caufield to someone, I'd maybe say I'd probably relate him to maybe like a Christian McCaffrey. I don't know if that's exactly what you're looking for, but my reasoning behind that would be kind of like a smaller guy with like a lot of firepower to him and could kind of light up the game in an instant, like just like with a flick of a switch. CMC could kind of, we saw he did his high step, and then out of nowhere it's like a 15-yard gain. So
yeah,
I'd compare it to Caufield. I don't know if that's quite what you were looking for, but I'd interested to see.
Good call there. Yeah, I didn't even mean to like put you on the spot there. There's no wrong answer, but kind of a nice comparison for our viewers. McCaffrey's a running back, and Cole Caufield's obviously a winger. Plays left, plays the power play. He's kind of like the face of Montreal right now, outside of Suzuki, who's a centerman. But the one other player I'll mention, and I'll kind of give you my stance on this, but I saw it in a similar sense to the Vegas versus Washington Stanley Cup Finals. And I know that in hockey there's a 7-game series max, and in football it's 1 game. But when we had Vegas versus Washington in the NHL coming in, I think everyone knew that Vegas was underdogs, and they were never supposed to make the finals in that first crazy inaugural season for them. So the way I see that is we had Brock Purdy, who was Mr. Irrelevant, taken last in the draft, facing off against Patrick Mahomes, who was proven, whether you want to call him a similar example to a guy like Ovechkin, who won that series and won his first Stanley Cup. Obviously, Mahomes just won his third Super Bowl, but I thought it'd be interesting to bring up that aspect of Super Bowl compared to hockey. And obviously our goal is to grow the game, and hopefully one day for hockey you have something as big as the Super Bowl, right? So
Yeah, it's definitely insane. Like how many people watch it, how many people bet on it, how many people talk about it. Like it's crazy, just absolutely ridiculous.
yeah, yeah. Now, obviously, we talk about rivalries too, and although the Chiefs Niners wasn't a huge rivalry, what can you say about rivalries in the NHL and what we've seen in the last week or so with that?
Well, there's just been so many crazy rivalries over the past year, I want to say in general, and then we could look at what happened in the past week. The biggest one that I want to talk about is Edmonton and Calgary, because I think their rivalry is just something that the NHL needs to almost just grab and run with, you know what I mean? Because there's so much, like Connor McDavid and Draisaitl talked about it in their interview on 32 Thoughts, the podcast with Elliot Friedman. And they said like they almost marked that game on their calendar. But in the past week, another team that Edmonton's taken head-to-head and just not ragdolled them, but, you know, has almost got the upper hand on them in the playoffs, taking them to get 7 games. But the LA Kings kind of snapped back at them, shutting them out. I believe it was 4-0.
Yeah.
With David Rittich, who has been absolutely on fire this year.
Nuts.
And kind of taking Cam Talbot's job.
Shutting out the Oilers has to be, honestly, one of the most impressive things. It's weird to say, but like that's probably the most impressive team you can shut out, other than maybe the Toronto Maple Leafs are a high-powered offensive team, right?
Yep.
And that's a little maybe biased to say just because obviously you have Leafs and Oilers with some studs on their team, right? But, you know, shutting out a team like Vegas doesn't feel the same, at least in my eyes, right?
Yeah, no.
But I guess getting to your point about that rivalry of Edmonton, Calgary, I think you can just see the environment there in Alberta. It means a lot when you have a similar, whether it's a province or a state, that both teams kind of share almost, right? So I think that leads us a little into Ontario, where we're from. What do you have to say about that and the Battle of Ontario?
So right now, I can say confidently that the Battle of Ontario is officially back. I know they were chatting about it a little bit before the season started, kind of saying that, all right, with Ottawa being, you know, their roster looks a little bit better. Obviously, the season went by and it didn't kind of turn out to be in favor of Ottawa, I want to say. But after the game that occurred on, I believe it was Saturday night, it was just crazy what happened there with Morgan Rielly. Like, I'm chilling in Murray's room. We're watching the game. We're kind of just like on our phones, whatever.
Yeah.
And then out of nowhere, breaks down the ice. We're like, all right, who is this guy that's about to get an empty net goal? We're like checking for Tim's picks, checking for like fantasy. You know what I mean? Like, that's your instant thought. He takes a slap shot, and I don't know why. Me personally, I didn't really, and this is Ridley Gregg, takes a slap shot. Me personally, I didn't really like think anything of it. I don't know why, but it was just kind of like one of those things. Like, all right, that was kind of like cool. Like he's just symbolizing like, all right, that caps off like a good game.
Yeah.
Out of nowhere from the top rope, Morgan Rielly comes in and just cross checks him right in the ear, like just straight head target, intent to injure, targeting. Headshot, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
And then now, obviously, it's built into a bigger thing online. We had Sheldon Keefe saying that he thought it was appropriate. Claude Giroux in an interview kind of took a step back and said, you know what, no comment. I don't want to say the wrong thing.
Yeah.
And obviously, we're going to hear from Ryan Reeves, and he says, make hockey violent again. So he was all for it. So a little bit of an interesting situation, but let's just say the Battle of Ontario is back.
Yes, and I'm glad you said that. We'll focus off of that Ridley Gregg situation just so it's a little more positive. I'd be that no comment guy as well, just because I know there's so much controversy. But I think the more important point we're trying to make is that it is back, and Ottawa seems to have some leverage in the regular season over the Leafs. Whether it's this year or last year, they really have their number sometimes, right? And one of the biggest things I've looked at is the past 10 years, and the Ottawa Senators have a 24-16-6 record against the Maple Leafs. So they've done a little better. I mean, but for a team that's been below the Leafs in the standings at the end of the regular season, call it every year, you shouldn't have that much trouble beating the Sens. And it kind of goes to show who the Leafs are, right? There's nights where they win and there's nights where they don't.
That's why when the conversation, and I know we were talking about it like 2 weeks ago or something like that the NHL kind of revolves around the Toronto Maple Leafs. I honestly think it does because, and obviously that's a little bit of a tough statement to say, but when we look at even the previous game, not the one that just happened on Saturday, but even before when the Leafs hosted Ottawa, I don't know if you remember, I think Brady Tkachuk scored. Ottawa beat them on home ice, and Brady Tkachuk just had an absolute game and a half. I think he had a breakaway goal. I'm just kind of going off the top of my head here.
Oh, that lucky one, that lucky breakaway. It was like out of the box or something, wasn't it?
Yeah, out of the box, I'm pretty sure, if you remember. it just kind of goes to show that these teams take the Leafs almost a little bit more serious. So
They want to win, yeah.
yeah, they definitely want to
yeah.
win, no question. So I'm definitely happy with how Saturday's game went, at least for hockey in itself. But going forward, you know, I don't know if that was the right move by Morgan Rielly. I don't really have like an official statement to say. But let's just say if I were playing and that were to happen, I would feel disrespected also. I don't know how I would act. I don't know what was the right thing, to do, what would be the right course of action, but let's just say I would feel disrespected as well.
Yeah. Now, one question for you, Sans, to put you on the spot again, but what are your thoughts on when a player has an empty net and they have a clear way basically to score a goal, but then they want, their teammate to get the hat trick call, or they want their teammate to get like a milestone? And do you see any disrespect there if let's say it's like, I don't know, but what are your thoughts on that?
I don't know. I think it's an interesting topic because obviously you want to see your teammate get a hat trick, and if it was you, you would only hope for the exact same thing, that everyone was maybe focused on you to get that hat trick. But at the end of the day, it's a business. At the end of the day, it's a game, and at the end of the day, it's a team game at that. So if you have an opportunity to score, I don't mind it. If you remember, I think it was the middle of November, Brian Hayes had an opportunity to get a hat trick. Kevin Hayes, sorry. I was just trying to remember this. Kevin Hayes had an opportunity to get a hat trick. He had 2 goals, and then Robert Thomas, I believe, put it in the back of the net. And then as they were celebrating, he kind of like put his hands up, and it was like, oh, like, I'm sorry, man. Like, I really didn't want to score that goal. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
but
that's how it should be done, though.
Right? I remember watching the last 3 minutes, and I was like, you know what? Like, they're obviously, like, it's evident that they're trying to get them the puck here, but after like 30, 40 seconds, it's going to come to a time where it's like, okay, we don't want to like fluff this up and then give up a goal.
Yeah, because we've seen that happen, and it's a really interesting conversation. Last thing I'll say about empty nets is we had our boy Owen Tippett cash a big bet for us last night and hit the over 3.5. So he got his 4th shot on net with an empty net goal, which was pretty sick.
Yeah, I'm definitely a big fan of Tippett. I like seeing him score those big goals. I'm not like, I don't really know what gambling is. I'm not like a big gambler or anything like that, so I don't really know like.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, honestly, in my fantasy matchup, it was pretty big to get the shot on goal there. So
yeah, no, definitely. No, I think for sure a place that kind of symbolizes gambling, and we just took a big look at it this weekend and what it can provide, is Las Vegas, and we've seen that Las Vegas, although winning the Stanley Cup last year, has kind of struggled, and their playoff race and hunt did go well last year. Obviously, lifting Lord Stanley, but there was a player on their team that was missing throughout that postseason that kind of raised a couple eyebrows, and that player was Phil Kessel. And this year, he's still waiting for a contract, patiently waiting, and it kind of brings up the question. I know we were talking about it, and we were like, dude, we have to talk about this on the pod, but why do you think that Phil Kessel doesn't have a spot on the team? Because he's kind of like a veteran. I don't know exactly what he's looking for with a contract, but we even saw Patrick Kane, a player of that caliber, like higher caliber than Kessel, almost get signed to a team-friendly deal, I want to call it. Like, it's very confusing to me why Phil Kessel wouldn't want to sign, or why any team wouldn't want to sign Phil Kessel right now.
Yeah, maybe a would have been a weird take here, but like maybe like teams are happy with who they have on their 3rd and 4th lines. Like, it's a simple thing to say, but I think that could be true. Where like, perfect example is the Tampa Bay Lightning, right? Like although they have some struggles here and there, and they do let up a lot on Vasi in terms of shots and stuff, like they trust their guys, even when they got guys who are hurt. They're not going to sign Kessel, right? We had Tanner Jeannot was out for 2 months. You're not going to go sign Kessel, and they didn't, right? They trusted their whether it's AHL call-ups, whoever it is. Like, I don't know where Kessel would land, but for some reason I'm going to say he's not going to sign this year with the team. Like, I think it's almost too late now.
Yeah, it's almost coming to that point where it is too late, but we've seen so many times like late in the season, and I'm talking about like game 75, where out of nowhere a player like that, a veteran, kind of signs with a contending team. It's almost like if it ain't broke, don't fix it. So if you're looking at some of the top teams in the NHL, maybe like you said, they don't want to touch any of their lines right now. But I don't know. I just don't see why a team like maybe Carolina or even Philadelphia or even New Jersey that's looking for like a little spark or someone to maybe get online with Jack Hughes. Like, obviously that's a little bit of a stretch to call Phil Kessel a first liner, but I'm sure Phil Kessel could at least score like 15 goals if he were to play at least 35 to 40 games.
I would say no, but like who knows what shape he's in, right?
Yeah.
I know what you're trying to say though. He can make an impact, whether that's like with his goal scoring or even on the top power play, right? Because he can thread the needle, right? So
yeah, exactly. Well, anyways, Phil Kessel last year, before we wrap this up, scored 14 goals in 82 games, and then the previous year had 8 goals in 82 games. So it looks like that take by me is a little bit wrong. Maybe I overestimated him a little bit, but I guess looking at it from a GM standpoint, when you look at those two stats from the past 2 years, combine that with he hasn't played in the past. I mean, we're
7
like
months,
50 games through the season. He hasn't
Yeah.
played in the last 7-8 months. 36 points in 82 games last year is not that good.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
I guess it could kind of impact the locker room. Anyways, we'll get away from the veteran standpoint.
Yeah.
of it,
No
and
more
we'll start to look more
hot dog talk, I guess.
yeah. No more veteran standpoint, and we'll look more at the Calder race and the rookies this season. So it seems like Connor Bedard apparently, per sources, is quote unquote close to returning. I don't know. Obviously, there's close could be 1 week, close could be 1 month. We're not exactly sure. Injuries are all over the place. But what do we think, Eric, right now with the Calder race?
Honestly, I never really. My problem was that I didn't make like a proper prediction really before the year. But I do think if Bedard returns in the next week or even 2 weeks, I think he'll still win it. I think it's just going to make it closer and almost better for the fans when there's that front runners / like runner up, right? Like, and right now the only guy that I think could be the runner up is Brock Faber, and that's a little bit of bias there just because I like the way he's played there with the Wild, and I think that like he's the only guy that shows like the confidence of a first year player looking like a 5th year vet. Like, I don't know how else to put it, but when Bedard's out there, sure, we know he's 18, right? But he looks like he has the confidence of a 5th year player. Like, you know what I'm trying to say? So
No, I know exactly what you mean. I think that's kind of half the battle when you look at being a rookie in the NHL. And what we see with these rookies too is they kind of come into the league and they don't play their game. Like, it doesn't transition well from when they were playing in the OHL, WHL, NCAA, whatever it might be, where, you know, they were kind of like the man, and then out of nowhere, they're like a 3rd or 4th liner that isn't really playing in these pivotal moments. But when you look at Brock Faber as what you say is the only guy to maybe challenge Connor Bedard in the Calder race, I mean, I'll agree with you because we did watch him play, and he does look confident with the puck. And like I said, that is half the battle. But I don't know if I could see Connor Bedard losing this Calder race, even if he maybe plays like 60 games this season. I think he's played probably like 39 is the exact number. I think it was the last time I checked was yesterday. It was like 39 games played, 33 points. So close to point per game on one of arguably the worst teams we've ever watched in NHL history. So if I'm Connor Bedard, I'm not too worried about the Calder race. I think it'll be waiting for me at the end of the season. I'll worry more about recovery. But
yeah, stay healthy once you're back, right? Like, play the rest of the season. You don't want to be like leaving the last 3 games.
Yeah, and if you don't, you want to have a long NHL career. So definitely focus on that health. Some players that were able, though, however, 2 players that are close, or 1 player that is close, 1 player that just passed the 1,000 mark in playing games. And when we talk about the topic of staying healthy, is Alex Pietrangelo and Brad Marchand. That Pietrangelo just played his 1,000th game last night against Minnesota in the loss, where I think it was 5-2 they lost. Eriksson topped it off with an empty net winner. And Brad Marchand of the Boston Bruins, now captain, just announced this year, is very close to 1,000 games.
Yeah, I'm really happy for these guys, especially because they're Canadian. I think that means a little more knowing that we've seen them on what do you call it, Olympic teams / World Cup of Hockey teams. I have a ton of positive memories from Marchand, while the biggest one I have of Pietrangelo is when he put our Bruins to bed in Game 7 there with that nifty backhand. I don't know if you remember that goal, but I could tell you exactly what happened, and it actually was Marchand who went for a brutal change, which caused Pietrangelo to take a nice 3-on-2, dish it with his backhand, and that was kind of the rest of Game 7 wasn't good after that. So I guess to bring it more positive, though, for Pietrangelo, like, he had to give a pretty good game last night, and it's a huge accomplishment. So we didn't get to see the whole presentation because of the TV timeout. Like, it went to commercial, and you could kind of tell they had finished it up by the time we got back to like the game. So I'm happy for both of them. I think Marshy, you better set the tone tonight against the Lightning and do something big for your 1,000th game. But both great careers, right? So it's kind of nice to celebrate that.
Yeah, it'll definitely be a good game too against Tampa Bay. I don't know, is that game at home?
I think it's in Tampa.
Oh, that's okay. I mean, it would have been cool if.
No, it's in Boston. Yeah.
Oh wow, really? Okay, so that is sweet. So I was gonna say it would have been cool if the game was in Boston because it's like, okay, they could do like a big presentation. I'm sure the building will be electric. But no, that's sweet. I'll definitely want to tune into that to watch that because obviously watching Marchand growing up has been insane. And I was talking to Davis yesterday. And I was like, you know what? Like, is 1,000 games like that? Like, is it really that good? Like, you know what I mean?
I overheard that. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, I did ask because I just kind of wanted like the recognition of like, is it? And he kind of described it. He was like, well, think about it. If you play 82 games, 10 years, you're not even at that.
Yeah.
So 10 years of playing, not even missing a game, you're not even at this 1,000 mark. So for Brad Marchand, obviously to already have a Stanley Cup, for Alex Pietrangelo to already have 2 of them, it's going to be a great feat and definitely good for the game, no doubt.
Okay, go.
Yeah, definitely a great career for them.
Yeah, I agree. And honestly, to put you on the spot quick before we finish off with our last topic, I would have to ask you, do you ever see Marchand not being a Bruin, and do you ever see Pietrangelo leaving Vegas?
I don't really see Marchand leaving the Bruins. Obviously, I believe he's signed on contract for 2 more years. I kind of want to confirm that just to double check.
I'll confirm for you.
Yeah, I don't know if you want to check both their contracts, and then I could give you a little bit of a more confident answer. But with the Bruins being in contention for the Stanley Cup again this year, and Marchand captaining that team, and it looks like they're going to be just as good next year too, as long as they could keep some of these core pieces. I don't see Marchand ever leaving. Pietrangelo, on the other hand, Vegas already won their cup. Maybe he's close to retiring. Who knows? That's kind of an answer for him and not for us to kind of, assume and just kind of like guess. But no doubt, I'm sure both teams are extremely happy to have both players.
Yeah. And honestly, Marshy's signed this year and next year, and then obviously he looks like he should get an extension. But Pietrangelo's signed till the end of 26-27, so he's got a little more time with Vegas. Hopefully, we'll see.
Yep.
But I guess that leads us into our final topic of almost not critique, but just that trade deadline talk. And I want to hear if you agree or disagree with certain things happening, and we have a little speculation ourselves. I think we'll save that till the end just so our viewers have a little teaser there. But I have to ask you about the whole defenseman talk that's been going around, because right now the rumblings for forwards and goalies is pretty much silent in my opinion, and it seems like defensemen are just getting not talked about, like, I don't want to say for no reason, but we're hearing Chris Tanev, Noah Hannafin. I won't name the others yet, but like we're hearing these names and we're not hearing too many other names. So do you think that the hype for Tanev and the hype for Hannafin, or maybe guys on like those teams where they're not your number 1 but they're not your number 4, like, do you think that they can provide value to a cup contender?
I think in the playoffs, for sure, they could definitely add value. As for the regular season, I wouldn't say that they'd provide like a massive value. Like at this point, if you're going to be a buyer at the deadline, you already know that your team's going to be in quote unquote contention for the Stanley Cup. I don't really think that a player like Tanev will be the make or break for your team winning the Stanley Cup, especially if you're looking at like a team like Vegas, a team like Boston, a team like even like Philly that wants to become more of a contender. Obviously it's nice to have them in the playoffs, definitely for having a deep lineup, but I just don't think that some of these players that they've talked about on the trade deadline table will really make a massive difference. The only player that I do see doing that is Jacob Markstrom if he were to be traded, and then obviously Kuzmenko and Elias Lindholm have already been traded, Sean Monahan, who's already been traded. I'd say that those 2 players that have already, or 3 players that have already been moved could kind of push the needle a little bit more. But a player like Brandon Tanev, I don't see him really being the make or break for your team if you're already a contender.
Chris.
Yes. Chris.
That's
Tanev.
okay. I love Brandon too, so it's that's a guy I would love on my team. I don't think he's really done in Seattle, I guess. Yeah, I honestly can agree with what you're saying. The reason is on the 32 Thoughts podcast I was listening to, Friedman was kind of hinting towards like a team going after someone else while they went for Tanev. So perfect example he gave was the Leafs going for Tanev and Hannafin, not just Tanev. So it's like yeah, we don't have something just for Tanev, but if we gave you a really good piece, we would want more than just Tanev. It's a really interesting conversation, but again, these defensemen are also more injury prone when it comes to guys like who block shots, who give big hits, right? So like you said, the regular season, like you're not getting maybe the value until the playoffs, right? If they're healthy, and if they're not, then it doesn't really mean as much, right? So
Yeah, exactly.
a couple more trade deadline questions for you would be, should the Devils or the Penguins go all in? Why or why not?
I mean, I don't see a team like the Devils right now. I just think their biggest flaw is their goaltender. And we saw last night in his interview, Jack Hughes kind of said, and this isn't a direct quote, but I'm kind of, from what I remember when I saw it, he said, the interview, I think, said, like, it was a good game, blah, blah, blah. And Jack Hughes said, yeah, like, it's easy when, our goalie is able to keep it out of the net. It was something along those lines, which obviously a little bit funny, but it's so true, right? Because if your goalie is standing on their head or even just kind of playing like a half-decent game, it makes it so much easier for your defense and your offense. So for me right now, the Devils need to shape out their goalie situation a little bit better. I think, was it Pittsburgh you mentioned to me?
Yeah, Pittsburgh as well, who's not in a playoff spot as well.
Pittsburgh, who both teams are not in a playoff spot, but I know that Crosby's having borderline one of his best seasons in the last couple of years, but he looks great, almost better than Ovi, some would say. So it's a little bit disappointing that the Penguins aren't one of the top teams in the league, especially after getting that big acquisition of Erik Karlsson in the offseason. I don't know. It's a weird spot that Kyle Dubas is in right now because he's in the time frame of owning Crosby. And if he's not going to move on from Crosby, then I think you have to be a buyer at the deadline. So if you're the Devils, I'm a little bit hesitant. I want to figure out the goalie situation. But if you're the Penguins, as long as Sidney Crosby is going to be on your roster, you have to make a move. You have to try and get him a Stanley Cup. And if not, maybe you could be a little bit complacent, trade away the core and just kind of put him around some young guys and try and build their value that way. But if you're Kyle Dubas and the Pittsburgh Penguins, you should be buying at the deadline.
Yes, and a question that we won't answer ourselves, but I guess our viewers can maybe chime in on this, but why is Jake Guentzel on the trade block? I'm confused about this, and no explanation will kind of help me wrap my head around it. So
yeah, it's another conversation that's just so weird because Guentzel is a good player on a good team with a good lineup. Like, I think the biggest thing is maybe, and obviously we don't have any source to confirm this, but Guentzel might be struggling with the idea that maybe they're not going to be buying at the deadline. Like, is that what they've heard? Is that what they talked about? And did he kind of say, you know what, then ship me out of here because I still want to get a cup? I believe he won one cup already. I think he has one. And then with Crosby's contract almost coming up, his kind of tenured with the Penguins, only a couple years away from completion. I don't know if Guentzel is maybe complacent with kind of chilling around for like 2 more years if they're not going to be making these powerhouse moves to really make a run at the cup.
Yeah, exactly. Well, at the end of the day, I wouldn't be very happy to see Crosby and Guentzel split up because I think that they complement each other, and Guentzel is not I don't think he's a 40-goal scorer without Crosby, unless you have a guy like McDavid. I seriously don't think so. And not that I don't want to see him struggle, but I think that struggles could happen if he gets moved to a wrong team, right? So
exactly.
I'm going to give one quick hot take before you end it off with your hot take regarding the Toronto Maple Leafs. So my hot takes regarding the Philadelphia Flyers, I'm sure you can understand why, and that's just because I've liked watching the Flyers this year. You ready for it?
Yep.
So my hot take here is that the Philadelphia Flyers will acquire Vladimir Tarasenko from the Ottawa Senators before at the deadline or before the deadline. Quick rationale: I think the Flyers can make it work with their cap situation. The only guys that they're really looking to move right now are a guy like Sean Walker, Nick Seeler on defense there, and I think that because they're in a playoff spot right now, they need that little more bit of scoring / veteran scoring. They're just too young of a team to succeed in the playoffs right now. But honestly, adding a guy like Senko and letting him play there for a year or just the rest of the season, I don't think that can hurt, especially if you give him that role that he wants, right?
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting conversation because Tarasenko right now on a 1-year deal that is expiring, making $5 million for the Ottawa Senators. And with the rumblings, if you want to call it, of Jacob Chikrin not being happy, maybe the Senators are looking for a defenseman. And with the Flyers having such a flurry of defensemen, like Sealer, Drysdale, Sean Walker, like a lot of good defensemen that have played well this year. Even is it Ristolainen that's been having a pretty good year? There was one more guy that I'm missing out on.
York?
Cam York. Like they're kind of in a spot right now where they can have they can move on from a lot of defensemen. So
yeah,
I actually like that idea from you. The only issue is I just don't know how much Ottawa would really ask, because Tarasenko's obviously on a contract that maybe Ottawa would have to retain some salary, but definitely a good take from you.
Yeah. We won't get into what the trade would look like now, because I want to leave this with you with your last hot take. So why don't you go ahead with that and shock our viewers, let's say.
Yeah, so for me right now, I kind of wanted to end the pod on this, but from what I've heard and talking to an individual that I know very personally, he has told me that it is of the utmost interest for the Toronto Maple Leafs to sign or to trade for David Jiricek right now. And with him being a right shot, with Morgan Rielly kind of being on the fence of a 5 to 10 game suspension, with the trade deadline coming up, and everyone kind of questioning, are the Leafs serious? What this individual told me was he would be very interested to see if the Leafs are interested in David Jiricek, because it would be almost the perfect fit, and a very good fit at that, because Jiricek obviously just drafted, I believe it was in last year's draft, 6th or 7th overall, or 2 years ago. Right shot, strong player. We saw how good he was in the World Juniors. So could this be the big splash that the Leafs have been waiting for almost 5 years in the making, where it's like, okay, we finally got a player that is not on an expiring. He might be part of the future. The question I have for you is, what do you think the price of a player like David Jiricek would be for the Toronto Maple Leafs?
Yeah, so huge of you to ask this and help us end off, but the Leafs lack picks and they lack a deep prospect pool. I won't say they lack a prospect pool, but I think that whether or not they're happy with it, they're going to have to give up one of Cowan, Minton, or Nick Robertson. I know Nyes is not going anywhere. That's just the way it is. They're gonna have to give up one of those three, I think, with, call it, a third, maybe a fourth. I don't think you're gonna get a first or second out of Toronto, just because they lack the picks till call it 2026. And who wants a pick in 2027, right? So exactly. I think that whether you like to hear it or not, one of those two that played for Team Canada might be on the move, and maybe it makes sense for Columbus. They've got guys like Provorov and Severson on defense right now, so I don't know if they need a defense prospect back. So maybe it's a guy like Cowan or Minton. That's such a good question, though, and I think that it's a good question to leave our viewers off as well.
Yeah, it's something to kind of digest and look at as we head into another week of great hockey, and we're going to look forward to it, obviously. A little bit of schoolwork to do this week. We're going to focus on that.
A lot of schoolwork
to do. Oh, yeah, heading into reading week. 2 papers done last night, 1 exam tonight, 1 presentation with Aiden at 8 a.m. tomorrow. Thursday, I have a lab presentation and a lecture. And Friday, I have another 5K run with my class, so that's going to be very interesting. Definitely looking forward to that. I know we're looking to watch a lot of hockey during reading week, but without further ado, we'd like to formally thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, 15 episodes in the books. Thank you so much, guys, and the next 15 are going to be just as good, if not way better. So here we go, and thank you.